Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لو التعليم التذكر والتذكير ونفع دفاع إفادة استفادة وحتى تمس بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعاء إلى هدى ودلالة على خير ابتغاء وجه الله وطاعته وكره ثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. اللهم علمنا مما ينفعنا وينفعنا مما تعلمنا وانزلنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم. Welcome everyone. Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah bless you all. And this is our first session of Living Islam for the year 2024. So Jazakallahu khairan for being with us tonight. For anyone that this may be their first time, just as a quick overview, this is not a lecture. This is not a bayan. This is not a presentation. I have absolutely nothing prepared for tonight. This is an open space. This is a space where we can come and talk about whatever it is that, may be on our minds. This is also not a Q&A. I always try to make that um, disclaimer that it doesn't just have to be people asking me questions and me trying to answer them. Again, this is an open discussion. This is something that we developed a few years back because when we were doing the Mecca Center in person, some of the students had said that they wish they had opportunity to kind of ask questions that weren't covered in class or things that they were going through without having kind of like limitations on asking around a specific topic. So we developed the Living Islam as an open space. So as we like to say, nothing is off the table, so to speak, but we do ask that everything be done with Islamic etiquette and decor, inshallah. So as I usually like to say, I want to more or less remain quiet, and I'm going to let everyone else lead the conversation. And if no one has anything that they want to discuss or talk about, then we can sit in each other's silent company for the next 2 hours while I drink my Smoothie King smoothie.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad. We did have like 2 questions that came through the registration. I think both of the sisters are present. The first question was about converting to Islam as a topic, and the second one was about how to do prayer if you're disabled. The sisters that did submit those questions, if you could add in any additional points that you wanted Ustad to talk about, just in case to give him a little more insight, inshallah.
Okay. So conversion, was there anything specific or just general advice in regards to conversion?
It was just the topic of converting.
Okay. Wow. That is it's very hard to kind of um really generally speak about conversion. And the reason why I say that is because conversion is something where, yes, some people will have similar experiences. However, people will always have their unique circumstances. So, for example, if you're someone who is coming from, for example, a Caucasian background, that you're of European descent, living in America, for example, your experience with conversion is going to be very much different than someone who is, for example, African American or Latino, and so on and so forth. Also, there's the aspect of family and how they view religion in general, and also how they view Islam specifically. Um, you also have the aspect of um, a person's normative way of life prior to converting. So, I mean, there's just so many dynamics. And then not to mention the aspect of kind of getting used to things that you're more than likely not going to be used to. So, things like going to the masjid or hearing Arabic language and getting used to certain terminology, or even trying to learn how to pray in a completely new language. Dealing with the aspect of marriage, because generally speaking, no matter what the situation is that generally a lot of times when people convert to Islam, the aspect of marriage, quickly comes up. um, Whether you want to say that's a good or a bad thing, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, there's just so many things that just makes it hard to kind of generally say. But the general advice that I can give, and it may sound kind of cliche or whatever the case may be, is take it one day at a time. That essentially one of the things that sometimes will cause people to kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, burn out, is like you become Muslim or you convert to Islam, and then you try to become super Muslim, meaning that you try to do everything that you hear about, everything that you're learning about, like you try to do everything all at once. And the thing is that for many people, yeah, oftentimes you can't keep that up. It's kind of like the track example that they give. You can look at Islam as being a marathon, not a sprint. So if you come out the gate, giving it all you got right off the blocks, then yeah, you might burn out, before you hit a mile. But if you just take it one step at a time, usually oftentimes I'll tell someone who just recently converted to Islam, make your first primary focus the prayer. you know, just, do everything that you need to do to learn how to pray properly. Don't necessarily worry about anything else. Just make your priority the prayer, learning how to say the Arabic um, statements in the prayer, learning the different motions in the prayer, learning the different prayers and what times they come in and how many cycles they are, and so on and so. I would just say, like, make the prayer your primary focus, and then once you've become comfortable with that, once you've mastered the prayer, then you can add on from there. So for example, going on to learning the basics of fasting in Ramadan, and then, once you're comfortable with that, then going on to learn about zakat. And then, once you're comfortable with that, and then, you'll have a firm foundation. It's not to say that you won't be learning other things as you go along, but it's to say that, you want to take things, bit by bit, not necessarily try to take everything all at once, so to speak. But again, because there are so many factors in regards to conversion, again, is like no way that I can kind of uh, give a overarching um, advice, so to speak. Is it's always going to be person specific. I know people, they've converted and they were kicked out of their homes. I know other people that converted and their families were extremely happy for them. I know other people, they converted and it was a situation where or I know people who were thinking about converting, and it was a situation of just, never having been in a state of being a minority, and trying to deal with that, the aspect of, for all of my life, being a part of the, overarching majority. Now I'm in a position where, people will recognize me as a minority, and for some people that's a very difficult thing to go through. I know people who were asking me about, can they pray in the bathroom, because they knew that if their family found out they were Muslim, that it was going to be a big problem. So, I mean, again, there's so many different variables in terms of it. But again, my general advice would be
Slowly. Hello, I'm one of the people who had wrote in and was speaking on the conversion. My name is Brittany, and I am soon going to be converting over to Islam, and that is one reasons why I signed up for the class, just so I can gain more knowledge on it and everything like that. And I seen this class on, well, I had started looking up stuff, and you know how when you start looking up stuff, it seemed like it pops up on your social media. And that's how I seen this class.
Well, we welcome you, Brittany, and we pray that you'll have a beautiful experience, an easy experience. But again, my general advice would just be, again, take it one step at a time. You know, This is there's a lot of things that can come about. And so, I would definitely just say, take it one day at a time. And if we can be of any assistance to you, then, we will try our best, inshallah, God willing.
Oh, yes. And then you had said something else just a moment ago. You said once people convert, marriage is the big thing. And that is a big thing with me too. It's
Okay.
going to be me converting because the person that I'm with Brittany, mommy's on the phone. The person that I'm with already practices the religion of Islam.
Okay. Yeah, that's very common. I was recently talking to someone. I think I was maybe talking to the inmates that I work with not too long ago, and I had mentioned how a large number of people that convert to Islam or who have interest in Islam is due to oftentimes a significant other who is Muslim. I think I had jokingly said if I had $100 for every person that was their situation, I have a nice savings account right about now.
Oh man. And I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing though, right?
If I have to answer the question honestly, it's not necessarily a bad thing for the person converting to Islam. However, for the person that is Muslim, because the thing is that in Islam, we only have two possibilities in terms of relationships. It's either you're either single or you're married. For example, having a boyfriend or a girlfriend in Islam is actually not considered to be permissible.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
so you have to be married. So the thing is that a lot of these situations have been situations where it was a boyfriend or girlfriend type of thing. So from that point, no, it's not good. But the thing is that at the same time, God can guide people in whatever way that he wishes. I know some people who were in a boyfriend girlfriend relationship, but they were truly sincere about their Islam and becoming Muslim. And so they quickly, adjusted their lives so that they were no longer going to be in that boyfriend type and girlfriend type of situation. So,
Right. So I converted over, which it is something that's, it's not just for that. It is from the heart, something that I am actually curious of, because before he came along speaking it to me, I did have an uncle that was trying to get me to convert over as well. So I have been asked like, by a family member and now by a person that's non-family. So I was just already in like a weird space religiously. Um Already I come from a Christian background. Um so I already was in a weird space. I'm just trying to get grounded, basically.
and again, may Allah make it easy for you. God make it easy for you. If you're still interested in terms of kind of learning more about Islam, I could recommend for you, there is um, a series that one of my teachers does. I'm actually working to be certified as a teacher within it. But in any case, there's a series of Why Islam is True. And that's what it's actually called, Why Islam is True. And they have some free content that can kind of give people the basics of the belief in Islam and why we evidentially say that Islam is true, based upon actual evidence, not necessarily just based upon text, but actual evidence that people, even if they're not Muslim, um, can recognize, so to speak. So if you wanted to look into that as well, you can as well.
Yes, I will definitely look into that. I will, because I'm trying to get all the knowledge in that I can possibly gain. I'm supposed to be taking my Shahada at the beginning of February. So I'm ready. I'm ready.
May Allah make it easy for you.
Yeah, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah it happens.
Mary Bell, I see you had your hand raised. Maribel, are you speaking? Because it seems like I can like hear you speaking, but I can barely hear you speaking.
I'm using a tablet. Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better, but it's still kind of low. Is it possible that you could have a mic or something that you could attach to the tablet? Or if you could speak a little closer to it?
Am I closer now?
Is it just mine or is everyone else?
No, it is quite low. She did submit the question about praying while being disabled.
Someone
I think that's what you wanted to get insight about, right, Mary Bell?
But I also wanted to say that I am not for marriage. I'm just relationship with Allah. That's it. So yeah, I'm one of the very few that are not there for marriage. I am there to have my strength in my relationship with my Creator. That's all I'm in here for. Now, with that being said, right now, because I'm going through vein surgery on my leg one at a time, I do pray. Nothing's gonna stop me from praying. But what I do want to say is, are there any type of prayer, usually when for disabled people, like if you use the walker, I use the walker to bend all the way down to hold on to it. But it's both of my legs for now. I'm just saying for now, for about 2 weeks. I'm gonna be like that. Like I said, nothing's gonna stop me from praying. But how can I accommodate myself to where it will be okay with the love for me to pray? Because like I said, nothing's gonna stop me, but I want to make sure I'm doing it okay. And
Okay. Okay.
saying I don't understand how to explain it any better. I'm autistic. I'm trying to explain myself.
Okay. Inshallah. So when it comes to praying, when a person has physical limitations, then the Sharia becomes accommodating to that person's situation. So probably the easiest way for me to word it without getting into like a whole fiqh class in regards to it is that essentially you pray in the manner that the prayer is normally done as much as you're actually capable of. So, for example, if a person is in a situation where they can't stand, they're like it's just physically too taxing on them to be able to stand, then in that particular case, a person can sit for the duration where they have to stand. Or if a person can't go into the bowing position, that they have a situation where they just cannot bow, then when it comes to the bowing position, then they can sit in the time of bowing. Or if a person is in a situation where they can't go into the prostration, they can't go into sujood, then they can sit in that particular moment when they go into sujood. So essentially, what it is that you pray as much as the prayer in a normative fashion as you can. And those places where you're not able to physically do those movements, then, for example, you can sit down while doing it. So, for example, if it's a situation where a person is not able to bow or prostrate, for example, then the thing is that if they're going to be sitting in the chair, then what they want to make sure they did is that when it came to the bowing, that they bowed a little bit, a little bit forward. And then when it comes to the prostration, the sujood, is that they bow even further, so that they are lower for the sujood than they were for the actual bowing for the ruku. If a person is not able to stand, then, of course, if you're going to be sitting, then you would sit, kind of basically straight up, while you're doing the portion that is standing. And then again, when you go into ruku, that you would, lean over slightly, and not to, but not all the way. And then when you stand, you have to do the standing after the bowing, you'll come back up. And then, like we said before, that you will make sure that you go into prostration lower than what you did for the bowing. So essentially, that's what a person would do. Now, the thing is that again, it goes based upon what a person is able to do. So if a person, for example, is able to actually go into the bowing, they are actually able to bow, then the bowing is still going to be a requirement. Or if a person is able to go into prostration, then the prostration is still going to be a requirement. So again, the basic concept is that as much as I am physically able to do, that's what I do. And then in those places where I'm not physically able to do so, then I can take the dispensation of, for example, sitting, or even if it's a situation where I'm not able to, I can lie down. And so if I were going to lie down, the basic aspect would be that if I couldn't, stand or sit, then I would lie on my right side with my body facing towards the direction of the prayer. If I couldn't lie on my right side, then I would lie on my left side. If I couldn't do that, then I would lie on my back. So again, it just depends on the nature of what a person is physically going to be able to do or not. But again, it's a situation where I do as much of the prayer in a normative fashion as I'm capable of. And then those places where I'm not able to, I can sit or lie down if I need to.
Okay, I'm glad that you say that because on my leg, I can do this, but I have to sit standing on my knees. I can't really stand them like sitting down to do doctor like that. Because, my leg, for now, like I said. But like I said, nothing stops me from praying and studying 12 my 5 prayers. I get invited by a lot. So yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Alhamdulillah, may Allah make it easy for you and give you a speedy recovery, a shifa kamina, a complete recovery, inshallah ta'ala. I see that there was a message in the chat as well. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Welcome your guidance around the following. Usually when I offer the 360 daily sadaqah, I make salat al-duha, or I use tasbih beads and offer 360 repetition of dhikr. Since reading Quran is dhikr, what guidance may exist regarding reading Quran as a way of offering the 360 sadaqah? So the thing is that the Prophet ﷺ, and I think yes, it was mentioned in the chat, like right before the person who placed that response in the chat, right before it, is that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, take up good deeds only as much as you're able, for the best deeds are those done regularly, even if they are few. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said that in regards to whatever good deeds that we want to take on as a means of nafila, as a means of extra acts of worship, then we want to make it a situation that we are able to consistently do it. So whatever it is that you're able to consistently do, start off with that, and then once that becomes easy, then you can increase from there. Kind of look at ibadah the same way that, for example, people will give in terms of weightlifting. For example, if a person is lifting weights, you start out with a light weight that you're able to manage, and then as you go on and that weight becomes easy, then you only go up by 5 pounds, for example. And when we say 5 pounds, we're talking about 2.5 pounds on each side, so to speak. And so you do it incrementally. Like you don't, try to add on 10 pounds, after a week of doing something, whatever the case may be, but you take it bit by bit. So for example, if you're only able to read a page of the Quran, then that's perfectly fine. You make that your regular habit that every day I read a page of Quran. Once that becomes easy, then I can increase. Then I might go to a page and a half. Once that becomes easy, then I might increase again and go to 2 pages. So doing it bit by bit, and this way, inshallah, you'll be able to keep it, and it will be easier for you as you try to increase from that. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for you, inshallah.
Okay, and I have been studying how to pray as well.
Mhm.
And the person that I'm with, he has been trying to instruct me, is to the best that he can how to pray. But I don't make every prayer. Um, partly one because I don't know what to say yet. Like, I don't know any Arabic.
Mhm.
So I was trying to see where I can learn that at as well.
So usually what I advise people in regards to that is that there are many books, even apps nowadays, that will give you basically the transliteration of the things that are said in the prayer. So for example, the Fatiha, the beginning, the opening chapter of the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, all the way to the end. There are many places that you can get the transliteration from that, as well as the tashahhud, which is something else that needs to be recited in the prayer, atayatu, barakatu, salawatu, tayyibatu, lillah, to the end. As well as even some of the short chapters of the Quran that you recite after the recitation of the Fatiha. So usually what I tell for people to do is that you can have all that written down on a piece of paper, and according to many scholars of Islam, it will be permissible for you to just read from that paper as you pray until you're able to begin to memorize it. Because usually what's going to happen is that at first it's going to be slow because this is a whole new language. You know, you're still trying to get used to the words and
Yes.
so it'll be slow at first. But what'll happen is that as you continue, you'll start to remember it more and more. So it'll become faster and faster. And then it will get to a point where you're not necessarily going to have to look at the paper as much because it's just going to become rote memory. And then eventually you'll get to the points where you'll just find that you don't need the paper at all. And the reason why I will sometimes recommend that is because it makes it where you're still going through the process of kind of doing rote memorization, praying 5 times a day. You're going to be saying this, the Fatiha, you're going to be saying at least 17 times. The Tashahhud, you're going to be saying a total of 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Yeah, the Shahad you're gonna be saying about 9 times. And so the thing is that it'll again, first you'll be able to do it faster, then you won't necessarily have to look at the paper as much anymore. And then eventually you probably won't even realize it, but you'll get to a point where you don't need the paper at all. And so in that way, you're able to still do your prayer without having to worry about, oh, what if I forget or what if I didn't memorize it? But at the same time, it's still helping you with your memory. And so that's what I usually recommend for people is to just have a piece of paper where you look at it. And then this way, over time, you'll just kind
You
of
know it. Yeah, I'm gonna get me a paper for it. That way I can know what to say and what he is saying because he speak Arabic, so he know what he's saying. I just don't know.
Yeah. But again, all of this will come over time. Is that, inshallah ta'ala, over time, again, that's the other piece of advice that I always give is that, don't try to necessarily become super Muslim all at once. That's why I always tell people just, the first thing you're going to focus on, just focus on the prayer. Don't necessarily worry about everything else. Just make your prayer the primary focus.
Okay.
And then after that, once that becomes solid and you're comfortable with that, then we can start building more on top of that.
Okay.
There's another mention in the chat. It says, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. My question is about sabr and trust. I've been patient for a specific person for marriage. How do I know whether to stay patient and keep my heart for this person, or if Allah is guiding me in a different direction? Am I patiently waiting for someone, yet I am blocking what Allah has intended for me? Is that even possible? So the thing is that oftentimes with marriage, for one, is like one of the only few times that people actually pray istikhara. For example, for those who may not know, istikhara is the prayer of guidance. Is that there's a particular prayer that one would pray in order to get guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from God. And oftentimes it's only used when people are trying to get married. But the thing about it is that prior to marriage, if a person is going about it from an Islamic perspective, you're not going to be in a position where you can truly love someone. That essentially the feelings that a person has, again, this is in the manner that if you're going about trying to get married from an Islam perspective, is that any feelings that you have towards someone is only going to be lust. And basically it's the thing where it's like, the whole concept of like, everyone loves to be loved. That, it's nice to have a situation where you like someone and then they return that liking of you. But the thing is that, you ask anyone that's been married or is married, is that true love that, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهُمَا مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, that he made between them, that he made between them love and mercy. That love that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to is a love that comes once you're able to be in a situation with a person intimately for a significant amount of time, meaning that you are going to see more than this person's representative. And the reason why I say that is because anytime that you're going about meeting someone with the intention of marriage, you're not really meeting that person. What you're doing is that you're meeting that person's representative, meaning that that person is going to present the best side of themselves towards you because they want you to like them. So they're going to show you their best qualities. So the thing is, like, no one's going to go, as one of my teachers gave an example, like, no one's going to go and, say to a brother or sister that they're trying to marry, I'm pretty lazy, I don't really like to, get up early in the morning, and I'm hoping that my spouse will kind of take care of me and do all the chores around the house, and I don't really want to work all that much. So if you don't plan on working, then I hope you don't mind living in poor or whatever. Like, no one says any of these type of things. And like, another example that my teacher gave us, like, he said that just an example is like, someone went to a woman's father to propose for marriage, and he just starts running off all his negative qualities, like, I have this problem, I have that problem, I have this problem. And by the time the man finished, the father just looks at him and was like, brother, I wouldn't marry you to the shaitan. But the thing is, the reason why I'm saying that is that no one goes in, showing all their, exactly, all their weaknesses, so to speak. Those are things that you kind of filter out as you begin to live with a person, and like you start to let your guard down, so to speak. And so the reason why I say that is that if you're in a situation trying to get married and it doesn't seem as though that is not being facilitated for, and this is part of the aspect of the prayer of guidance, is that you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that if this thing is good for me, then make it easy for me. And so the thing is that if you find a situation where it's not being made easy for you, it's not being facilitated for you, then that's a sign that it may not really be for you. And so it's a situation of not trying to force it. And so in that type of situation, this is why I said from the beginning, from an Islamic standpoint, you want to be in a situation where you don't put your heart into it initially, because it could be a situation where it doesn't work out. And as I said before, is that generally speaking, those are lustful feelings, not an aspect of true love. Again, if you're going about it from an Islamic perspective. And so I know it doesn't sound romantic, sisters, and the thing is that it's not meant to be. It really isn't. The beginnings of an Islamic marriage are very much business-like. It's really like, okay, are we compatible? Do we have similar, outlooks on Islam and outlooks on life? And do we think that we will make a good couple? And then after we get married, that's when you start to build up in terms of love and so on and so forth. And so the thing is that also helps in not making it too difficult to part ways if it's deemed that this is not going to be a good situation, or if it's just that it's not going to work itself out. because sometimes that happens. Is that sometimes it could be a situation where you find that this person actually isn't good for you. And this is, again, another reason not to necessarily let your feelings take the lead. Because what happens is that if you let your feelings take the lead, then your heart will start to tell your mind, what to do, basically. So basically your heart will start saying, I love this person. It doesn't matter if they smoke. It doesn't matter if they do this. It doesn't matter if they dress like this. It doesn't matter that they do X, Y, and Z. And your heart starts to say, to your brain, like, we can work our way around this. We can change this person, or it'll get better once we get married, and so on and so forth. So basically your feelings start to take place of your better judgment. And so again, it's a situation of, really looking at it from the standpoint of, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitating this for me? And if not, then, I may have to walk away from the situation and be content that whatever is truly good for me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will manifest it for me. And it may or may not be this person. And so you just really have to look at the situation and see if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it easy for you. And, if it's not being made easy for you, then again, that may be a sign that you may want to not necessarily continue to pursue the situation and see if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has something better for you. And Allah knows best.
And that's speaking on having the relationship, right? Like dating.
So the thing is that there's no dating from the standpoint, like as one of my other teachers would say, it's like, it's great to date as long as you're dating your wife. Or for
Right.
standpoint of woman, it's great to date as long as you're dating your husband. So the
Yes,
thing is,
we got to be married.
yeah. So the thing is that's why I said, like, prior to marriage, Islam is not romantic. like, anytime that you're going to talk to your potential spouse, there always has to be a third party there. Like, I remember before I was,
Whoa, it's got to be a third party there.
yes, yes, you cannot be alone with someone. The Prophet ﷺ, he says specifically that whenever two people are alone, a man and a woman, the third party is the shaitan, is the devil. And I put it to you like this: for sisters, this
Okay.
may not necessarily resonate 100%, but I'm going to let you in on how men think. I've asked this question to many different men, and pretty much you never get any different answer. Is that if you put a man in a room alone with any woman, I don't care who the woman is, that is not a blood relative of his, you can almost guarantee 99.9% of the time a sexual thought is going to come to his head. Even if
Okay.
he's not necessarily attracted to that woman. That's just the way men are. I remember one teacher, he was saying that his sister-in-law, I think, was speaking to him about something. And she was going through some type of situation. And I forget exactly what the conversation was, but basically she was saying that it's like, yeah, I know. All men are dogs except for my brother-in-law. And he responded by saying, no, all men are dogs, especially your brother-in-law. Now, the thing is that it's not, not from a literal standpoint, but again, the aspect of it is that men we're physical. So we like the physical. And that's why, like, even from a non-religious perspective, they did a study. You could look it up. They did a study about the concept of, can men or women have friends of the opposite sex? Like, can you have this, like, a platonic friend of the opposite sex? And guess what the study showed? They asked women, and about 80-90% or whatever this is were of women said, yeah, of course, I have plenty of them. And then they asked men, and what happened? The men, 80, 90, or whatever the case was, percent of them said, no, absolutely not. Like, I'll tell sisters in a heartbeat, sisters, if you ever wanted to break a man's heart, just tell him you're like a brother to me, or you were just a really good friend. Like, generally speaking, any man that is quote unquote your friend and he's heterosexual, he's only your friend because you haven't let him go further than that. And so, as I like to say to people, is that from the standpoint of Islam, Islam deals with realities, not ideals. So the ideal is like, yes, that a man or a woman should be able to control themselves so that nothing happens and so on and so forth. But Islam deals with realities. What's the reality? Is that men are very physical. That's why, again, I'll give you another insight to men, sisters, is that for a woman, it doesn't really make sense that a man can be intimate with a woman and say, I don't have any feelings for her, but also say that I love another woman, and commit commit an act of adultery or whatever the case may be. For many women, that makes absolutely no sense. For men, that makes perfect sense. Why? Because again, men are physical. So again, this aspect is that Islam, it deals with realities, not ideals. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't even come close, don't even come near to fornication. And so because of that, Allah has legislated that a man and a woman who are technically speaking capable of being married cannot be alone. So for example, like I was giving the example that, before I got married, every time that I had to speak with my wife, it was her mother there, her sister there, her uncle there, someone was there. I didn't, me and my wife had never physically touched each other until after we had actually performed our marriage. So, that's what I said, is that the
Beautiful.
be there and it can come, but it's after the marriage, not prior to the marriage.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
There's someone that mentioned, what is the ruling on using cosmetics, for example, soap and creams made from beef tallow? Is it permissible to use if it's not stated explicitly to be halal? This is a madhab differing question. So different madhahib have different answers on this. So some madhahib will say that if a body has a molecular change, and basically they do a qiyas, they do an analogy based upon vinegar, is that we know that, for example, vinegar is something that is considered to be pure. And so the basis of it is that they do it, they derived the illah, they derived I don't know how to translate illah, but essentially they derived that the wisdom behind that ruling of vinegar being pure, because what is the process of vinegar? Vinegar goes from fruit juice, then it continues to ferment until it becomes wine. We know that wine is impermissible, but then it continues to ferment even more until it becomes vinegar. And so when it becomes vinegar, it becomes permissible again. So some scholars have done an analogy from that to say that any compound that goes through a molecular change such that it goes from one state to another, in which the state that it enters into, you can't necessarily relate it back to the state that it was before. That it, again, basically that has been changed so much that you can't say it's the same thing that it was before, then that thing would be considered to be pure and permissible. So according to some scholars, based upon that analogy, they would say that using something that, has, beef tallow in it in terms of cream, stuff like that, will be permissible. Other scholars, they don't consider that analogy to be applicable to the situation. They would just consider that vinegar is just an exception. It's just something that the Prophet informed us was pure, but it's not necessarily based upon it necessarily going through a molecular change. And so some scholars would still say that if it's not from a properly slaughtered animal, that it would be impure. So if you're looking madhab specific, you can mention the madhab that you're looking for the ruling to come from. But if you're looking for just like a general discussion on the matter, then there's a difference of opinion in regards to it. Some scholars would say that it's molecularly changed so that it becomes pure. Others would say that it is Shafi. No, it'd be najis. Unless you can say that it came from a slaughtered animal, it's najis. So get the vegan soap. I have been using YouTube's walkthroughs to learn the prayers and follow along to them. It has been very helpful since I learned better that way. Yes, so I mean you can use the videos as help. It's just don't pray behind them. So like, don't pray behind, don't let the video kind of lead you in prayer, but you can watch them to try to help you when you do pray, inshallah. Yes, and so a madhab is a school of law. In Sunni Islam, there are considered to be four primary schools of law that people will learn the religion from: Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali. So that's why I had asked if there was a specific school of law, because I know the questioner, and so I know that they may have had a specific a specific school of law in mind in regards to that question. So that's why I was saying that different scholars, different schools of law, have difference of opinion in regards to it. And so the questioner was specifically asking in regards to the Shafi madhab. So yeah, in the Shafi madhab, they do not take the position that the molecular change will make it pure. So if you're going to use, the Shafi madhab, it has a default position that any meat or any meat byproducts are going to be considered to be haram unless we're certain that it's halal, meaning that it'll be considered to be haram until we can prove that it was actually from a properly slaughtered animal.
Ustad, I have another question from a sister. I don't think she is present. But she asked, how do reverts choose between Shia and Sunni communities? I feel like I agree with different parts of each sect.
Wow.
It's a hard one.
I know, because I have a definite bias. Like I can't, like, there's no way that I can say that I don't have a bias. Wow. Wow. I don't know how to answer that question. I may have to really take Imam Malik's position on that adri. Like, I don't know how to answer the question. And the reason why I say that is because I have a bias, being that I'm Sunni Muslim. So I have a position that people who follow the Shiite interpretation of Islam are making mistakes in terms of certain aspects of the religion. And so, I mean, I would say that, for example, Sunni Muslims make up the majority of the Muslim population. And the Prophet ﷺ, he had recommended to be amongst the Jama'ah, the greater majority. And so, but again, it's not, again, I can't answer that question from an unbiased perspective. Is that I would say that Shiite Muslims have made mistakes in certain aspects. So I mean, if a person wanted to, they can, go through and look at the history of Sunnism and Shiitism. But even then, I would definitely suggest to go through it with a teacher. Because again, it's not to say that everything that Shiites do or everything that Sunni Muslims do is either good or bad in certain aspects. That, there are a lot of, I'm sure, beautiful Shiite Muslims, but again, there is a very a very prominent difference in terms of aspects of Aqidah, and that leads to differences throughout all different aspects of the religion. And so, again, for me, I can't answer that question without being biased. Oh, yes, sorry. Aqidah meaning Islamic creed or Islamic theology. And so I can't answer that question without being biased, because, again, I do believe that the Shiite Muslims have made mistakes. I'm not saying that they're not Muslim. I'm just saying that I would say that their belief system as well as other aspects, in particular, the aspect of even their law aspect. Because, for example, for Shiite Muslims, they have the imamate way of law, meaning that they feel that there is a member of the family of the Prophet ﷺ, who is a designated imam, and that person essentially has the authority to issue legal rulings, and those legal rulings have to be followed, almost similar to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And so, again, that is a basis from a standpoint of Aqidah and legal law that is completely different from Sunni Islam. And so I would say that they've made a mistake in that regard. But to try to be as objective as possible, I would say that, you know, a person can sit with the teacher going through some of the aspects of Sunni and Shiite Islam. But again, I would say that Sunni Islam is the majority and is the one that, if you look into, is more correct. But again, it's not that I'm not accusing Shiites of not being Muslim, but I would just say that they're mistaken Muslims. And Allah knows best.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
So,
Can you talk about the whole situation with halal meat and people saying that they could, you know, the halal meat, we can eat the meat from the people of the book, and so therefore sometimes people may get meat from wherever they get it from, as long as it's not pork, and say Bismillah over it and feel that that makes it okay. I don't agree with that, but I hear it periodically, and I just was wondering if you could just clarify that.
so you want to go into the controversial? We're going to all the controversials today. Next
I
one.
don't.
So we already talked a little bit about the madhab, and then we're gonna go in a little bit further. And then you're mentioning music. Excuse me, you're mentioning meat. The only one that's left is music and the 3 M's. But no, I'll talk about it inshallah ta'ala. So yes, so the thing is that we know categorically, because this is something that is qat'iyya thubut, but it's not, but it's dhanniya dalala. So what does all that mean? What is qat'iyya thubut and dhanniya dalala? So qat'iyya thubut is something that is coming from a text that we know for certain. So meaning that this is something that has been transmitted by what we call in Arabic mutawatir, that there's so many people transmitting this information that is just unfathomable that they all conspire to make it up. So for example, the Quran is mutawatir. So many people have transmitted the Quran from the time of the Prophet ﷺ that it's just unfathomable that all these people made it up. So the aspect of the meat of Ahl Kitab is something that's mentioned in the Quran itself. That's why we can say that it's qat'iyyat thubut, that this is something that is necessarily certain, that we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran that the meat of Ahl Kitab is halal. However, it's still dhanniya dalala, meaning that the ruling that we obtain from this is speculative. Because what does that mean when we say that the meat of Ahl Kitab is halal for you? Does that mean that anyone that identifies as, for example, being Christian or Jewish, their meat is permissible? does that mean that this is something that is general for all Muslims for all times? Or was it more or less specific to the time of the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Is it halal as long as they slaughter according to the methods that have been mentioned in their books? Or is it halal based upon any way that they slaughter? So the thing is that because you have all of these questions in regards to it, there are differences of opinions that different scholars and different people will take. So the thing is that you're always going to have this difference of opinion in regards to Ahl Kitab, the meat of Ahl Kitab. And so you have to, it's one of those things where you have to look at yourself and say, what are you comfortable with when you stand before Allah? So I'll give you the basis that has been mentioned in terms of eating meat in America without necessarily worrying about where it comes from as long as it's not pork, is that there have been individuals who have said that America is a Christian country, whatever that means.
I've heard that too.
But I'm putting that out there, that last portion out there, whatever that means, that America is a Christian country. You take it for what you want it for. That America is a Christian country, and therefore, the meat of America is within the realm of the meat of Ahl Kitab, because Ahl Kitab definitely includes Christians. And so if America is a Christian country, then their meat is going to be considered to be halal unless you know otherwise that it's not. However, the thing is that those of us who live in America, we know that America is a country that you have all types of people living in America. Even the people that call themselves Christian, what does that actually mean? Because for some people, being Christian is just more or less the default that they go with because that's what they grew up with. Or it's just a cultural identification marker. It's just like on the questionnaire, oh, well, my parents, they were Catholic or whatever, but, I believe in science or whatever the case may be. But not only that, but we have a lot of people who are atheists. We have people who are devil worshippers. We have people who are Buddhists, Hindu, Sikh, and everything else under the sun. And all these different types of people, they may be working out the slaughterhouses that people are getting their meat from. Not only that, but the ways in which a person slaughters the meat, especially in these major companies, are not going to be Islamically sanctioned ways. Like, for example, if you have an animal, no matter who it's done by, whether it be Christian, Jew, or Muslim, and that person shoots a cow, they just take a shotgun, cock it, boom, shoots the cow. Is that meat permissible? No. That's considered to be meat. Why? Because that's not a proper slaughter. It doesn't matter who slaughtered it. If a Muslim did that, the meat is still haram. And the thing is that is some of the ways that some of this meat is being killed, meaning that they'll take a stun gun or whatever case may be, and they'll shoot the animal in the back of the head. Sometimes the animal dies, sometimes it doesn't. And then, because the shot in the back of the head is actually supposed to stun it first before they put it through whatever meat processor that they're going to put it through, and so on and so forth. So the thing is, though, again, you still have to go back to this concept of how some put it, that if we look at America as being a Muslim, as being a Christian country, then their basis is that by default, then you consider the meat to be from the Ahl Kitab until proven otherwise. But the thing is that others will consider that, including the Faqir here, will consider that to be a very weak argument.
Okay.
Because
so where should we get the meat from?
So the thing is that they have halal meat. I mean, even now, in many major grocery stores, they sell halal meat. Is that you'll see, it'll say HALAL, halal.
Okay.
So like, for example, ShopRite sells halal beef and lamb. There are also just halal meat markets, in general, and so on and so forth. But again,
Okay.
this is a matter of fiqh, and because it's a matter of fiqh, Muslims can disagree within it, and each one of them will be permitted to follow the position that they feel that is most accurate. So the thing is that even though I may have a strong position in regards to this matter, I'm not going to, if I see, for example, a Muslim eating at McDonald's, I'm not going to, become the haram police and be like, stop. You shouldn't be eating that. You shouldn't be eating that Big Mac. Stop.
You're not gonna be the haram police. So Muslims shouldn't eat at McDonald's?
Again, would I eat at McDonald's? No. But if I see another Muslim eating at McDonald's, I'm not going to consider it to be my obligation to tell that person not to, because I understand that there are people that, many people respect as scholars who have given positions to say that, for example, America is a Christian country.
Christian country. I got you.
But again, like I said, for me, the evidence is not strong enough. Why? Because there are so many other belief systems, and even for people who are Christian, you have two factors. One is that, again, Christianity for many people is just an identification marker. It doesn't really mean that I have the true theological belief of a Christian. And then also is that, especially from the Christian perspective, is that the Christians, they were given a particular way of slaughtering their meat within the Injil, within the Bible, but how many Christians actually even know what that is? So like I mentioned before, like if a Muslim walked up to an animal and shot it in the head or stunned it with a electric gun or something like that, would that meat be permissible? No. So if this is some of the common practices in many of these slaughterhouses, then how can we say that because a Christian did it is permissible? But again, that's a whole, that's a fit debate, thing. So the thing is that, again, I'm not going to, if I see a Muslim eating at Burger King, I'm not going to, go and smack the Whopper out of his hand. But would I eat from Burger King or any of these places? No. So the thing is, it's one of those situations where you don't have to feel some type of way because other Muslims are doing it. If you feel that a particular position is correct, then it is perfectly fine for you to act upon it, and it doesn't require you to try to quote unquote force others to hold the same position as you. This is one of those matters where there is a difference of opinion. So here is the next one. So we covered meat. Now we're going to get into madhabs, and all I need is just for someone to ask about music. Round out the 3 M's. Is it expected to choose a certain school of law as a Muslim? So this is something where outside of like a Western society or society where Islam is not the majority, where you have this question. Because if you go to many Muslim majority nations, like for example, if you go to Saudi Arabia, the bulk of the scholars that you're going to encounter will oftentimes be following some form of the Hanbali school, even though they do have the other schools of law there as well. If you go to, for example, Indonesia, then they're going to be following primarily the Shafi school. If you go to Morocco, they're going to be primarily following the Maliki school. If you go to Turkey or India, they're going to be primarily following the Hanafi school. But here in America, we got all 4 plus more. So generally speaking, what I tell people is that especially for someone who either A, is new to Islam, or B, is kind of recommitting to Islam. So maybe they were born to Muslim parents, but like they've never formally learned Islam, and now they're trying to recommit to Islam, is that whatever school of law you have the capacity to learn, just go with that. So, for example, if your primary education in regards to Islam is or has been the Mecca Center, then, for example, that we generally speaking offer courses either in Shafi'i or Hanafi fiqh. And so you can just pick either one. It does, you don't have to, there is no necessarily direct criterion of picking one or the other per se, but there is a nuance to that I'm going to get to. But all things being equal, if you have no extraneous factors that's going to push you towards one school of law or the other, then whichever one is easy for you to learn, just learn that one. Now, if you do have extraneous factor, so for example, I mentioned, for example, like if people tell me that they're living in a house with a dog, for example, I automatically will tell them, learn the Maliki Madhab. Why? Because the Maliki Madhab is the only school that says that dogs are not najis, or that dogs are not filthy. All the other schools consider dogs to be filthy. So if you were to follow any of the other three schools, you'd be driving yourself crazy trying to stay pure in a house with a dog. Or, for example, if you come from a family or you're going to marry into a family that is primarily one school of law. So, for example, if you're marrying someone from an Indian or Pakistani background, 8 times out of 10, probably, they're going to have a Hanafi orientation towards Islam. So for you, it would be probably more conducive to learn the Hanafi school of law. Or, for example, if you have some type of other situation that is personal to you, then it may be a situation that you would specifically choose one school of law because it would facilitate a greater amount of ease for your particular situation. Like, for example, people have known me that for years I have studied and even taught the Shafi school of law until I got 2 cats recently. Now I'm been studying and less practicing Hanafi fiqh. But that's because there was an external factor that came in, namely 2 cats. So now I've been studying and practicing the Hanafi school of law. There's an external factor that caused me to study and practice the Hanafi school of law. So if there's an extraneous factor, then yes, you may choose one over the other. But in general, if there's no extraneous factors, then whichever one is easiest for you to learn, then that could be the one that you can go with. Whoa. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum.
And can you please tell me more about what you mean by school of law?
So a school of law essentially is it's a because sometimes when I say that, people think that it's like an actual physical school. But when we say school of law, what we're talking about is that these are 4 methodological ways of practicing the religion. So basically, like, for example,
Okay.
when it comes to prayer, that if you were to read all the different narrations that have been mentioned from the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him, you would probably go crazy before you be able to pray, because there's just so much information and so many different narrations and different practices and so on and so forth. So the schools of law, essentially what they do is that they put the acts of worship into a systematic way that any average Muslim can just ask, okay, how do I make wudu, for example? How do I do the purification that I need to do before I pray? And they can tell you, okay, you wash your hands this way, you rinse your mouth out this way, you wash your face this way, so on and so forth. And in this way, you can learn the religion in a systematic way that is rooted and based upon the Quran and the practice of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and has been vetted by scholars over centuries. And so, again, it just makes the practice of religion more practical and easy without you having to sift through thousands upon thousands of statements and so on and so forth. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
No problem. Walaikum salam wa barakatuh. I'm currently helping a revert support group locally, and I'd like to consult you regarding a couple of questions. What is the best approach to help new Muslim brothers who are struggling with the drinking problem? Sometimes they are sober, but sometimes they couldn't help themselves and thinking about leaving Islam, feeling they couldn't stay with being sober. So one of the things is to note is that, as one of our teachers would say, never think yourself better than someone because you sin differently. Now, I'm not saying that the questioner is a sinful person, but what I'm saying is that this is something that we should always keep in mind for ourselves and also pass on to others. Is that Islam is not a religion that is expecting someone to be perfect. And actually, it's quite the opposite. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that if we were to be a people who did not commit sin and did not turn in repentance, that actually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he would actually do away with us. He would, obliterate us and bring about a people who did make mistakes so that they could repent to him. So Islam is not asking you to be perfect. Now, yes, there is a concept of like major sins and minor sins and so on and so forth. But the thing is, at the end of the day, a sin is a sin. And so just because a person may struggle with something that's considered to be more of a major sin, that does not take away from the reality that, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that Kuli bani Adam khata, that all the children of Adam make mistakes. All the children of Adam will commit a possible sin. But what did he say after that? That the best of the people that commit sin are those who repent. And so the thing is that I don't care if this individual, continuously drinks until the day that they die. As long as they believe in Allah and they believe in the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, and they're striving to overcome this situation, then inshallah they may have a high station with their Lord. And I'll give you an example from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. There was a man in the time of the Prophet sallallahu who was an alcoholic. He drank all the time. And he would get caught drinking and he would be punished for it. And to the point that one of the other Sahaba had cursed this individual. That, they basically had said that, why is so-and-so always getting caught drinking? And the Prophet ﷺ, he heard this. And what the Prophet ﷺ say? He said what? In one narration, it mentions that he said, do not speak ill of him because I know that he loves Allah and his messenger. In another narration, he mentions, do not speak ill, do not assist the shaitan against your brother. Do not assist the devil against your brother. So in both of these narrations, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is recognizing that this individual is struggling with the problem, but he's informing the rest of the companions to not criticize and to not assist the devil against this individual. That he's affirming that he loves Allah and his messenger. So the thing is that, again, Islam is not asking you to be perfect. So as another way I could put it is as, one person had asked one of my teachers, he said that, basically like, should I just give up? He's like, he's saying that, only thing that he does, like he keeps making mistakes. He keeps, keeps falling into different sins or different things that he shouldn't be doing. And he's like barely holding on to the prayer. So he's like, so he was asking like, should I just give up? Should I just, not even try anymore? And my teacher had very matter-of-factly had said to him, you can give up if your name is Iblis. Meaning that you can give up if you're the devil. But other than that, it doesn't matter how many times you make mistakes, you keep moving forward. That, you keep getting up, keep trying to get closer to Allah, keep trying to practice better, but know that mistakes are bound to happen. But with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can get through the different difficulties that we may face. A revert brother asked me if he can say his salah in English since it makes him more focused / have khushu' instead of saying in Arabic, which is foreign to him. What is the best approach to help him in this situation? Is there something that we can say to motivate him to learn it in Arabic? I would say to mention that the validity and the reward of the prayer is based upon following the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in which he did the prayer in Arabic, but at the same time, trying to use that as a motivating factor to at least memorize what it is that he's saying so that he can bring to his mind while he's praying what is the meaning of what is being said while he's saying it in Arabic. And so, that would be, kind of my suggestion. Because we may not necessarily know it or we may not understand it, but there's reward even in just saying the Arabic. I know for many people, and for the sake of time, I'm not necessarily going to do what I would usually do, but I know for many people that they've heard the Quran being recited and they couldn't understand a lick of it, but it affected them, in the heart, meaning that it affected them on a spiritual level. I know people that have been brought to tears listening to the Quran and they have no clue what's being said. Because even in the recitation of the Quran, that is a healing. That's why one of the names for the Quran is Shifa. And so there's a language that the heart speaks that doesn't need interpretation. So I would say to that individual to keep striving and also know that even after the prayer, you can make dua, you can make supplication in any language that you wish. Oftentimes I see problems experienced by new Muslims due to some attitudes from other Muslim brothers who are very strict or judgmental with religious rulings that make the new Muslims reluctant to come to masjid or Islamic gathering. What should we do to help the situation? I hate to say this, but it's one of those things where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he perfected Islam, he did not perfect Muslims. So, I mean, again, I hate to say it, but it's one of those situations where, try your best not to judge Islam based upon the actions of Muslims. And then you yourself, as best as you can, try to be the opposite example of what they're seeing in terms of negativity. That, try to be patient with them, don't become the haram police with them. Have a friendly demeanor to yourself, so it's just that they can feel comfortable with you, and just try to let them know that, some people, they learn the law, but they don't necessarily always learn the etiquette. That the reality of the situation is that from an Islamic standpoint, we're supposed to be strict with ourselves, but very merciful and lenient with other people. And so, the best way to try to do that is just for yourself to show the proper Islamic etiquette of, having that gentleness with dealing with other people. Even the Quran mentions it about the Prophet ﷺ. He mentions that if you had have come to them harsh and hard-hearted, they would have turned away from you. And so, even just showing them that verse to, as a reinforcement of this is actually not the way that we're supposed to do things, but some, different people have different personalities.
Assalamu alaikum again. I'm wondering, back to the different schools of thought, is there a book or anything that I could look at that just gives an idea of the different schools of thought?
In terms of kind of like the different methodologies of the schools of law or the different rulings of the schools of law?
Yes.
The different methodology of the school of law?
Yes.
Uh,
When you say methodologies, that means like how you put it into practice, how each school puts it into practice?
well, the methodologies would be more or less what each school uses in terms of how they come to their legal rulings.
No, not that then. Just like if I was interested in just seeing the differences in the
Difference of
Wow.
opinion.
I guess it's difference of opinion, but like in different schools of thoughts, there might be different ways that we do different things. Like just take like for wudu. I don't know if I think that there might be some differences. So I'm just saying, is there a book or anything that I could look at that would just give the different, I guess, rulings?
Give me 1 second. Okay, you asked. Here's a book. You can see that.
Okay.
So this is jurisprudence according to the four Sunni schools.
Can you turn it again?
Is it in all Arabic?
No, it's in English.
Okay. I
But-
see what you mean.
This is only on the acts of ibadah. So this is on prayer. This is on purification, prayer,
Mm-hmm.
zakat, fasting, hajj. Yeah, that's it. Just on
So
the
the
pillars.
pillars, the different pillars.
Yep.
I
So-
see how big and thick it is. I see.
So I use this as a reference manual. So I haven't read this cover to cover or anything like that. I use it as a reference that,
I
when there's
see.
particular masala, when there's a particular question, excuse me, I'm gonna put this back. When there's a particular question that I want to see what the different schools have said, then
Okay.
I use that as a reference. But in terms of going through, so the thing is that it can be kind of daunting to try to do that if you haven't mastered at least one of the schools of law, because it can get very confusing very easily. Because what happens is you start forgetting, okay, which school said which, and what position was this, and was this the Maliki position? Put it back, and so on and so forth. So
Better to just leave it be.
I mean, again, if you want to look at it just like as a general reference, just to kind of get a glimpse of it, you can. But you've seen how thick the book was.
Yes.
Uh, So I mean, you can, but I wouldn't try to practice based
No.
upon, I would say learn one specific school. But if you want to have that book in your collection just as a reference, then okay. But generally speaking, even for full-time students of knowledge, you don't
Yes.
to the aspect of comparative fiqh, I mean, comparing the different schools of law until
Right.
one of your final years of study.
I see. I think I would be interested in I guess learning one, because coming into Islam, I didn't get that school of law. I didn't know what I was following really in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean that in general, that's usually always the case. I mean, if by default, many people in America, you're either going to be oftentimes Hanafi or a Salafi Hanbali situation, because those are kind of some of the more prevalent schools and books that are available.
Okay.
But yeah, the schools of law are there to make things easy for you.
Can a scholar say that they are not of any particular school of thought? I mean, they can say it, but I mean, is that
That's more or less a more recent concept.
okay?
But there are scholars who say that. But the thing is that in that particular case, what traditionally many scholars would say is that for a person to try to say that person would have to be what's referred to as a mujtahid mutlaq, meaning that they would have to be an absolute mujtahid, and a mujtahid is a person who is able, and particularly mujtahid mutlaq is a person who's able to go directly to the Quran or directly to the Sunnah, meaning the life example, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and all of its components, and derive legal rulings from that. But the thing is that person would have to have mastered the Arabic language. They have to have mastered tafsir. They also have to have mastered the different aspects of the Sunnah, including the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as well as the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and so on and so forth. And then that person would have to master the different sciences of fiqh itself, as well as usul of fiqh, as well as basic aspects of logic and so on and so forth. And then also knowing the difference of the different schools in terms of the ikhtilafat, in terms of the difference of opinions, so that you can weigh the different positions and so on and so on. But as you can see, this is a very daunting task. Like you
Yes.
have to be a full-time scholar to do it. And so
Yeah.
for many scholars, they would say that modern day scholars today, the overwhelming majority of them have not reached that capacity. Like
Right.
they can be scholars within a particular school itself, but not necessarily to the point of basically creating their own school, so to speak.
Right.
But is the concept there? Yes. But traditionally, you name most scholars, they follow one of the four Sunni schools of law.
Okay. Jazakallah khair.
Oh yeah. Is it haram to be a cop? Not necessarily. I know or have known different Muslim cops. I mean, generally speaking, as long as a job does not require you to do the haram, then that job would be considered to be permissible. Would I want to be a cop? No. I already work around enough of them, and that's more than enough for me. So is it okay to change schools of thought? Yes, it is. Again, people can have different circumstances that come up. I mean, so even from the standpoint of following one school of law, it's not to say that you're like bound by every single ruling within that school of law. But the scholars in general would recommend that you try your best to adhere to the rulings of that school of law, particularly from a form of taqwa. You're about to make a mess. But yes, so there have been many different ulama throughout history who's changed their school of law. We're less than 2 months away from Ramadan. Will it be anyone's first Ramadan? MashaAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you all. And again, just take it one day at a time, inshallah. I really love this quote. Which quote was that? I'm just curious.
It was the one about your teacher saying that if you're not Iblis, don't give up. Good motivation, good reminder.
Yeah. If your name is Iblis, then you can give up. Again with the soap, I found out that tallow is actually turned into a different substance through some word that saponification when it's combined with fly. So even if I follow a madhab that considers it impure, am I wrong for using it anyway? The thing is that, for example, in the Shafi madhab, if you were to use that soap, then technically speaking, the Shafi madhab would say that you're essentially spreading najasa if you have wet contact with that soap. So if you're going to use the soap anyway, then it would be better for you. Madhab is a school of law, what we were talking about before. So if you were going to if it was a situation where it's like that's the healthiest soap for you, or like it's a medical situation for you, then my suggestion would kind of be like what I chose to do. Is that the reason why I said that I'm now studying and more or less practicing the Hanafi madhab after having gotten two cats is because the Shafi madhab, it considers that cat hair is najis. And anyone that's had cats knows that cat hair gets everywhere. And not to go into a long discussion about it, but it was just too difficult to try to keep up within the Shafi framework of how to keep yourself pure from cat hair. And so instead of just trying to take one opinion and trying to force it into the Shafi school, and even still I can, there's some discussion about it. But in any case, is that I just have gone and I'm going through the process of learning the Hanafi school and adhering to the Hanafi school, especially for the prayer, because that's where it's really going to be effective. So the thing is that if you're going to use the soap anyway, then it will probably be better for you in terms if you're talking about from the standpoint of greater taqwa, is to pass, like, so for example, the Hanafi school is one of the schools that say that the molecular change of a substance would render that thing pure. So if you wanted to, but at the same time, you'd have to make sure that, for example, that the Hanafi school recognizes tallow as having gone through enough of a molecular change. I believe it does, but I don't know 100% for sure. So, like, for example, if you wanted to ask Imam Kamal or Ustad Murad specifically about that, they would probably be better to tell you whether or not beef tallow would fall into that category of things that have been molecularly changed enough such that it can be considered to be pure. But in that particular case, then you can, because as one of our teachers had mentioned to us when we were still in Yemen, he said that if you're going to take a ruqsa, if you're going to take a dispensation from another school of law, then you need to learn the conditions and the integrals in regards to that dispensation. So, for example, if I'm taking a dispensation from another school of law that has to deal with prayer, then I need to know the conditions and the integrals of that school to take that dispensation. I can't just say, oh, well, the Hanafis say that it's pure, so I'm just going to ride with that, so to speak. That, no, I have to make sure now that, okay, that my prayer is valid according to the Hanafi school. So, for example, in the Shafi'i school, for example, it's considered to be an obligation to recite the Fatiha behind the Imam, for example. However, in the Hanafi school, if a person were to do that, the prayer would actually be rendered invalid. More or less it'd be rendered invalid, and particularly when you do it intentionally. There's more to it, but the thing is that being the case is that if I'm going to take a Hanafi ruqsa on something, then I have to know that, for example, if I pray behind an imam, I can't recite the Fatiha to myself behind the imam. I have to remain silent behind the imam. So again, this aspect of if I'm going to take a ruqsa from if I'm going to take a dispensation from another school of law, that I have to make sure that I'm implementing the conditions and the integrals of that school of law, and Allah knows best. On the topic of Ramadan, I have a chronic illness that may make it difficult to fast. I've seen many say you're exempt if you're unable due to illness. Isn't it true? Yes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually specifically mentions in the Quran that if you are sick or traveling, that you are exempted from fasting. And so if a person has a chronic illness such that they would either increase their illness, or they would prolong their illness, or they would be causing themselves great harm, then they may very well be exempted from fasting. And if this is something that they're never going to be able to overcome, and which is typically the case of chronic illnesses, then they would do an expiation for that. Essentially, they would feed a poor person for every day that they're not able to fast. So, based upon a person's specific situation, we would, determine whether it's going to be something that they'll be able to make it up later on, or if it's something where they'll just won't physically ever be able to fast, such that they would just do expiation for the days that they are not able to fast. And Allah knows best. We also have a Rajab tracker for istighfar and for fasting to get our hearts and body ready to welcome Ramadan. That might be useful. Feel free to download. Alhamdulillah. Oh, I didn't know that. Alhamdulillah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please. So if one is traveling during Ramadan, is that feeding one person, or how does that work, please?
So if you're traveling does not give you the expiation of feeding a person. It's only if you're, for example, sick or even maybe elderly, meaning that you're in a situation where you're just physically never going to be able to fast. So that's when you do the expiation of feeding a poor person for all the days of Ramadan. If you're traveling, then you may be excused from fasting during that time that you're traveling, but you would still have to make those days up after Ramadan, but before the next coming Ramadan.
Okay. All right. And I just want to go back to the schools of law again.
Mhm.
So I don't know which school of thought I follow. Does that make a difference?
It can. Um, in terms of you just want to make sure that your acts of worship are valid. So, I know, for example, I believe is this Ustad Murad or Imam Kamal that's going to be doing a class on Hanafi fiqh this upcoming semester. One of them is going to be doing a class on Hanafi fiqh. So, I mean, you can, but I know you've also have studied other classes with us at the Mecca Center. So all of our classes, when it comes to law, is based upon one of the four schools. Typically, it's either going to be Shafi'i or Hanafi. So if you've learned from one of us and you've implemented uh, the things that we've talked about consistently, then generally speaking, you should have no issue in terms of your major acts of worship. You know, as one of my teachers would say, is that in particular, like with the prayer, it's actually very hard. Like if you're actually praying and you're actually doing your purification, like you're making wudu, making ghusl, it's actually very hard to come to a situation where your prayer would just absolutely be considered to be categorically invalid according to all the scholars. But going forward, yes, it could be beneficial to specifically learn one school so that you can have some consistency.
And so when you speak about not reciting the Fatiha behind the Imam, if you're following, I don't remember which school of thought you were talking about, does that mean like in
Kind of
your head, you're just, you
No,
know, you
that so in the Shafi'i school, when a person prays behind the Imam, even though the Imam recites the Fatiha himself, the follower still has to recite the Fatiha in a silent whisper, meaning that you recite it enough that you would be able to hear yourself, but other people around you wouldn't be able to hear. So more or less like,
right.
so, but in the Hanafi school, if you were to do that, they would actually consider that to be something that would actually break your prayer.
Okay. So you would, in the Hanafi school, you would be saying it in your head.
You could be, but in particular in the times when the Imam is reciting out loud, you're supposed to be focusing on what he's reciting.
Okay. Okay. Mm.
Oh, someone was talking about the changing madhabs. Yeah. Imam Kamal also, he's changed madhabs. Imam Kamal used to study Shafi fiqh and then he started to study Hanafi fiqh. So I'm doing someone similar with Imam Kamal. Also, for those who may know Sheikh Faraz Rabbani actually used to study Shafi fiqh and then he started to study Hanafi fiqh. Uh, Imam Tahawi, he started studying the Shafi fiqh and then he switched to Hanafi fiqh. So I have a lot of precedent actually. Now I'm thinking about it. It's been a lot of a good amount of Shafis turned Hanafi, so to speak.
Ustad, I have a question from YouTube. Says, how do you not recite when the Imam is reciting quietly? example for the Zuhur prayer.
So in the Hanafi school, they say their position is that the recitation of the Imam, whether you can hear him or not, suffices for everyone praying behind him. And so they're basing it primarily on the verse of Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when the Quran is being recited, that you listen attentively. So from this Hanafi perspective, even though in the silent prayers you can't necessarily hear the Imam, you still know that the Quran is being recited. And so in that particular case, again, still in the Hanafi school, you do not recite behind the Imam. And the thing is that even, for example, in the Maliki school, you don't necessarily recite behind the Imam, meaning that it's not an integral. But in the silent prayer, if I remember correctly, in the Maliki school, it can be considered to be recommended to recite behind the Imam in the silent prayer. But it's not an obligation, that you could still stand silently, and the recitation of the Imam suffices for the people praying in Jama'ah. And so again, this is the aspect of fiqh in terms of the aspect of the prayer itself. Leave that alone. The aspect of the prayer itself is known. We know that we have to pray, but the details in terms of exactly how we pray is slightly different, because different Sahaba would relate different things of what they saw the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and sometimes the Prophet ﷺ would do different things to show us the range in which we can do things.
And so sometimes the individual that is leading the prayer will maybe finish saying Fatiha before I'll just use myself, before I finish saying it, whether it be silent or just saying it quietly. How does that work? If I haven't finished reciting it, I guess it's based on what you said. If I'm following behind the Hanafi Imam, then when he's done, I'm done.
Yeah, so in the Hanafi school, again, you wouldn't recite. And so it doesn't matter. Like, for example, say it was the silent Dhuhr prayer, so that you were in your mind, you were going through reciting the Fatiha to yourself in your mind, and so on and so forth. Then it doesn't matter if you finished it or not, you would still follow the Imam because he's leading the prayer.
Right.
In the Shafi'i school, one, you wouldn't recite the Fatiha while the Imam is reciting the Fatiha. That you would actually wait until he finishes reciting the Fatiha, and then you would recite the Fatiha. Now, if it's a situation where, generally speaking, they would say that in the first two rakas, you should be able to finish the Fatiha. Why? Because the Imam is going to recite the Fatiha and a surah after that.
Right.
And so that, generally speaking, should give you enough time. Now, in the last two rakas, if the Imam recites too fast, but you recite at a normal pace, meaning that you don't recite excessively slow, then you just go into ruku with the Imam, even if you didn't finish the Fatiha.
Okay.
Now, in regards to the comment on YouTube, it seems like that will make it even harder to concentrate in prayer that way. I mean, the thing is that different things affect different people. So I've found, for example, that by not reciting behind the Imam and more or less doing the Fatiha in my head without saying it out loud, I've actually been able to concentrate better. Just my own personal experience. So the thing is that, it differs. Leave that back. Put that back and put that up. Sorry. All the people that have children, they understand. Oh, put it back where it was. No, open that, put it back where it was, so I can close properly. It wasn't there. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. That is not like the trash. We've come to the end for the night.
So then the better thing to do is in praying in not the better thing, but in praying in congregation, just follow behind the imam.
I have one teacher who will probably say yes. But I would say the better thing to do is study a basic book of fiqh. I mean, generally speaking, many of the ulama would say that it's actually an obligation for people to at least go through one book of fiqh so that you can understand like the basics of your acts of worship so that you can have confidence and certainty that your acts of worship are considered to be valid. Because the thing is that, again, there are different nuances based upon different schools of law. You don't want to be in a situation where you're kind of mixing and matching in between. So, my suggestion would just to study the basics of one school of law, at least the fiqh of ibadah, meaning the fiqh of worship, the legal rulings in regards to worship. So prayer, fasting, zakat, hajj, prayer, fasting, obligatory charity, and the pilgrimage. And then really I would suggest going over the basics of transactions, essentially marriage, divorce, buying and selling, so that you can have a basis to know that you're doing things in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sanctioned, and that you're not possibly falling into things that are disliked or possibly impermissible. That would be my suggestion. However, as a default, because even in the Hanafi madhab, there are certain slight details that you have to know in terms of following behind the imam, for example. Like, for example, in the Hanafi madhab, when you do the tashahhud, that when it's the first sitting in the prayer, so like if you're praying a 3 or 4 rak'ah prayer, so you're praying Dhuhr, Asr, or Maghrib, or Isha, and you're praying behind the imam, in that first tashahhud, for example, in the Shafi'i school, they would say that you would say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu rasuluh, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, that you would send salam, or you send salawat upon the Prophet sallam, and then you would stand up with the imam to continue the prayer. And the Hanafi madhab, though, you would actually only say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu rasuluh, that you would not say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That is considered to be something that is not considered to be permissible to do in the prayer, such that one should not do it. If you're praying behind the imam, that mistake is more or less forgiven, but it's something that you should not do. Or like we mentioned before, that if you were to recite behind the imam, even in the silent prayer, it would break your prayer in the Hanafi school if you're going based upon the Hanafi school in terms of, for example, like tahara or something like that. So that's why I would say just to have one school that you learn from so that you can have consistency. And then that kind of will make it easier.
So is all of the instructors at the Mecca Center now using the Hanafi school?
Including me,
Yeah.
I'm not qualified to teach the Hanafi school.
Oh, okay.
I don't even like saying this, but I'm more qualified to teach the Shafi'i school.
Yes.
So like all the, if I do a fiqh class, it's still going to be based upon Shafi'i fiqh. Like me, learning and adhering to the Hanafi school is kind of like a personal thing.
Yes.
The thing is that, there's a lot that goes into coming to a point of teaching a school of law.
Got you.
I wouldn't even begin to try to say like I'm going to teach Hanafi fiqh. Like that's that there's so much that I can say about that. But just know that, me adhering to the Hanafi school of law, I'm a student. I mean, I'm a student of the Shafi school, but like I'm a baby in the Hanafi school.
Yes.
So, now the thing is that I have a basis in fiqh and general Islamic studies. So yes, I'm probably more advanced than other people
Yes.
because, I have a greater background in terms of Islamic studies in general.
Yes.
But again, there's a lot of I put you like this. It's like someone who's a doctor who is a specialist in optometry. So they're a specialist with eyes, and now they're switching their specialty to ears. I don't even know what that is called. The ear, nose, and throat doctors. I don't even know what that specialty is called. But in any case, they're going to switch to that. Like they're not going to start practicing right away.
Right.
They're going to have to go through the process of, they'll have a better basis than someone who's starting, fresh in medical school, but they still have to go through the process of learning all the different intricacies of ear, nose, and throat.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that. Any good resources for Hanafi fiqh? I think someone mentioned it in the chat. Ustad Murad and Imam Kamal. Like, for example, I've already sent a couple text messages to Ustad Murad in regards to Hanafi fiqh, because I know Ustad Murad has been studying Hanafi fiqh for some time. So like he's a resource that I have gone to ask him certain questions. But if you're talking about books, for example, right now this is the book that I'm going through in terms of Hanafi fiqh, Ascent to Felicity. This is a book in Hanafi fiqh. Once, inshallah ta'ala, I finish this book, I plan to go on to another book called Nur-e-Idah, which is another book in Hanafi fiqh. Both of these are covered on Seeker's Guidance, if a person wanted to utilize that. And then I'm debating of whether or not I will do a full-fledged island program in the Hanafi school. Allahu Alam, I have to see.
Hey, I have a quick question real quick before we end. Okay, so I was looking at the flyers for the classes and it says that you guys have financial aid. What is that through, like FAFSA?
No, but if you send a message to info@meccacenter.com, they can give some of the details in regards to it.
Okay. Thank you.
No
Can I
problem.
actually make a correction? Could you send it to a registration@meccacenter.com and then I'll forward you information about financial aid. It's a really quick process, but it does have this policy of attending all our live sessions. So if you do get approved for financial aid, you have to attend all live sessions. Obviously, we make exceptions for any emergencies, but yeah, send me an email at registration@meccacenter.com marcuscentra.com, and then I'll forward you that info, inshallah.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
So as you see, I don't work on the administrative side.
No worries. I mean, info@marcuscentra.com is good too. It's just I usually reply from registration, just easier for me.
Alhamdulillah.
And how many of these free sessions do you do?
The living
Or
Quran.
yes,
So this one is once a month. So
once
usually, usually it's the third Saturday of every month.
okay. All right. Thank you so much. And I did enjoy the session tonight. And inshallah, I'll be, speaking to you guys here soon.
Inshallah ta'ala.
Okay.
Is
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam ta'ala. There was a question, is it okay to make dhikr while the imam is reciting in the silent prayers? Again, it's going to depend on the school of law and at what point in time. So, when the imam, so in the Hanafi school of law, in the silent prayer, while the imam is in the position of reciting, like when he's standing, so that he'd be reciting the Fatiha, reciting a surah. Then in the Hanafi school, you definitely would not make any dhikr. In the Shafi school, for example, you'd only recite the Fatiha. You wouldn't say anything else. However, in the different other positions, like the bowing or the prostration, these type of places, it would be considered to be permissible to make dhikr. However, if you're going to do it out loud, then it needs to be in Arabic, generally speaking. And so that's a thing to note, that while you're in the prayer, that it needs to be in Arabic. However, of course, when you're outside the prayer, it can be in any language that you're most comfortable with. And Allah knows best.
Ooh, I have one question coming in from Facebook. What is the best istighfar to recite in the month of Rajab?
So technically speaking, there is no necessary istighfar that is coming directly from the Prophet Muhammad SAW. However, different ulama have mentioned different formulas of dua for the month of Rajab. So just want to see something. So for example, some of our teachers, they've like compiled specific formulas of istighfar. It's about 8 pages long. But like I said, there's no one that's been related from the Prophet ﷺ. So if a person just has an istighfar that they have sincerely from their heart, then inshallah that'll be beneficial. But like for example, this is just a part of the istighfar that one of our teachers has recommended. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. أتوب إلى الله من جميع ما يكره الله قولا وفعلا وخاطرا وباطنا وظاهرا. استغفر الله العظيم الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم أتوب إليه. اللهم إني أستغفرك لما قدمت وما أخرت وما أسررت وما أعلنت وما أسرفت وما أنت أعلم به مني. أنت المقدم وأنت المؤخر وأنت على كل شيء قدير. أستغفر الله ذا الجلال والإكرام من جميع ذنوبي من جميع ذنوبي الآثم. أستغفر الله الذي كلها سرها وجهرها وصغيرها وكبيرها, and it continues to go. So again, there's nothing that has been directly transmitted from the Prophet Muhammad SAW directly. However, again, different ulama have compiled different istighfars that they recommend saying, because they found benefit in saying it. So a person can use some of those transmitted istighfars, or they can say an istighfar that is just sincerely from their own heart. And generally speaking, that which comes sincerely from the heart is always going to be extremely beneficial. Because if you're reading istighfar, you're just reading it for the sake of reading it, but it's not truly coming from the heart, is not necessarily going to benefit you as much as one that is truly sincere in terms of fully coming from the heart, and Allah knows best. And so I believe that may have been everything. I don't believe we missed anything in the chat. And I believe we have come to the end of the session. So Jazakallahu khairan for everyone for coming out. I see that some people already had to leave. And so again, we appreciate everyone for being with us. We hope that there was some benefit in our coming together. May you please forgive me for my sins and my shortcomings. Any benefit, of course, was only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all the mistakes were mine, so please forgive me of them. And inshallah, we will leave you all in Allah's care. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam wa hasbuna wa ni'mal wakeel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh wa iyyakum.